Hi, and welcome to the video today. We're going to be working on probably the last bit of weathering for the Zero. Got a lot of progress done between now and the last time I streamed. This one's not a live stream. This one's just a recording because it should be a pretty short video. Um, from last time, I did some minor assembly. I got the landing gear uh, attached to the aircraft, all of the various components for it, the flaps, the tail wheel, finished off the engine components in there that I had yet to paint. Um, and when I'd left off last time, this was all glossy. I had just finished the decals. I put a gloss coat on it. Um, After that, the white areas around the markings were quite bright, as were the yellow on the front. So I came back with just some Tamiya smoke. Here it is. Um, that a nice transparent color, translucent color. Thinned it really well and used real light passes with it to get this muddying of the color that you can see on the wings there, where it's not quite so bright, especially on the side here. I did the same thing with the yellow to tone it down a little bit because it was, well, it was this bright, and obviously that wouldn't work for our purposes here. Um, so I got that on. I let it dry real well, and then I put. After that, I also did some oil pen washes to bring out some of the panel lines. So you can probably see that here, where this panel was just really clear. I also used a lot more of the smoke around the 20 millimeter Canon casing ejectors, because those would have been quite dirty. And so what you can see, hopefully, if you've been watching this from early on, is we've gone from, especially on the underside, something that was very monochromatic, very uh, boring, and given it some color, some depth, some interest with the oil washes that we did, the dot filter that we did, the smoke that we added, and now the pen washes. Then after I did that, I came back and I used all-clad flat coat on it because it shouldn't be extraordinarily glossy. And so now you can see most of the gloss is gone. There are a few places that I left it a little bit more prominent. You can see the spot here on the wing is a little shiny. I thought that might be like an oil spill, or not oil, but some sort of just weathering mark that might have remained glossier than the paint under it. So I left that alone. Thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe it doesn't make any sense, but I liked it, and that's what's important. Obviously, I also peeled off the masking for the canopy area, and it came out pretty well. Our masking did its job. There's a spot here that I'll need to just dab a little bit of paint on to cover up. The tape kind of pulled it off, and some touch up around the canopy edges. I also need to paint where the gun sight will sit, and then also obviously paint the gun sight itself, which is something I'll probably do just as a finishing step later. So we've come a long way. As far as construction is concerned, we're pretty much done. I also worked on the prop. Uh, Ended up using the decals rather than painting them because of these small, more centrally located yellow markers were not the full width of the blade, and so I figured it would be very difficult to mask those consistently. So I ended up spraying this with gloss coat, putting the decals on yesterday. Today I'll probably spray these off camera, another gloss coat to hide the carrier film, and then flat coat this for it to be done. And then we'll have this nice prop on the front of the aircraft when all is said and done. So that'll look nice. Um, but that'll be one of the last things probably to be done. Then of course mounting the canopy and attaching the radio line that I'll have to use some stretch to sprue for. But today, what I wanted to do was some of the last bits of weathering. Now, most of the weathering that I've done, I did before I put the flat coat on. You don't really want to handle the flat coat any more than you have to, because it's actually a rough surface on a, not microscopic, but on a small scale. That's what causes the light not to just be shining off the surface. It's got that rough texture to it. Well, every time you handle it, you actually leave some oils behind from your hands. You smooth down some of that surface, so you can actually get glossy spots from that if you're not careful. So we won't handle it much today if we can help it, but I had to do that because what we're going to do today is use some weathering pencils to finish out the modeling. Now what I use are these AK weathering pencils. You can buy them individually, you can buy them in a box set like this. They have a variety of colors. And what I like is that um, they have that variety. So you might be working on something that needs a lot of rust, and so they have various colors pencils that are supposed to represent light, medium, and dark rust. They have different colors of blues and greens and all kinds of different metallics, and so it makes it really nice to give some variety to the model. I'm going to focus on just a few today. I have one for smoke that I'll use for exhaust streaks. I have one for rubber that I'll use around the landing gear a little bit, as if the wheels have kicked up some rubber uh, on landing. I have some streaking dirt that I'll probably use mostly on the underside. I have some aluminum that I want to use to represent some chipping and wear. Again, I don't tend to weather mine particularly heavily, but there will be some chipping around where the pilot would get in and out of the plane. And then just some dust rain mark streaks that I'll probably add. So probably not a very long video, like I say today. This doesn't take a whole lot. My philosophy is a little bit goes a long way with these kinds of projects. So uh, yeah, hopefully you'll get the idea of it. And if you wanted to expand this to heavier weathering, of course you could. So let's get started with that. So I think I will start with the exhaust streaks because those are the most straightforward. Um, so I've got the exhaust on either side, and I just take the pencil and kind of draw a little bit. Um, the nice thing about this is it's pretty easy to remove a little bit of it if you feel like you've got too much. Um, but again, less is certainly more for this kind of stuff. Otherwise it starts looking kind of toy-like again, and we don't want that. That was the whole point of a lot of what we did over the last few days, few videos I guess, was do things so that they would look less toy-like. So you can see I'm starting to get a little bit of an exhaust streak there. It's a little bit more obvious on the video than it is in person because of the lighting, I think. We're just adding just a little bit of exhaust streaking, and then we can come back with a brush and kind of smooth it out a little bit. Um, it's harder to remove any of it when you have the flat coat down. That is one downside, but it gives it something to grip on. Uh, so again, it doesn't take much to give those uh, exhaust streak looks to the aircraft. Now, if you wanted, you could come back. I didn't pull this particular pencil out. Let's see. You could come back with some black, just like pure black. And add a little streak of that down the middle of those paths that we just made. And that'll give it kind of a darker center. Again, we don't want the lines to be too obvious, but there we've now got a little bit obvious, more obvious, having trouble focusing that close, I think. A little bit more obvious exhaust. And again, it's exaggerated in the camera just because of the angle of the light. It's not quite so obvious in person that it's that way. So I'm going to do the other side now. Apologies, you won't be able to see this as easily. I guess I can flip it around like this maybe. I had to put the camera back on the other side. My laptop died. So this is not the ideal side for which I would normally be doing this on. I'd rather do it on the other side so you could see a little bit better, but I'll come back with the final results in just a minute. Yeah, I've been streaming on my laptop rather than my desktop, just because it was more convenient to do so on the side. That made it easier for you guys to see. But my laptop's a bit old, and today it just did not want to work. So I actually started this video and went through all the description about what I had done and the modeling pencils and everything, and looked over and my screen had frozen and it was no longer recording, and I could not get it to play nice anymore. So I just decided, hell with it, we'll just go with the suboptimal placement of the camera so that we can actually get some work done. That's all I'm going to do exhaust-wise. A lot of people, as I've said before, will build these things just absolutely beat to shit. I didn't start out with that in mind, and because of that, I did not paint it in a way that would allow me to do that. So what I would have done if I wanted to have this really beat up is I would have painted it silver first. Aluminum, really. Then I would have put a clear coat over that, something really hard, actually something like a furniture polish from Future is what a lot of people will use. Make it really, really hard. And then come back with the green on top of that. And then I can actually come back with something sharp and pick away at it and chip it, literally chip it, to get that really beat up look. But we're not going for that today. We're going for a more, not fresh from the factory, but relatively new, because at some point it was new. So coming in here and adding a little bit of, carefully, I'm going to set this down and use my other hand to support the gear. Actually snapped one of these off earlier and hope I don't do that again on camera. That would be embarrassing. Just adding a little bit of color to the edges here, as if some of the rubber from the wheel have just been kind of kicked off on landing. Just kind of dirtying it up. Again, I'm not one to do it really any of this really heavily, so if that's what you're wanting to do, you'd need to use some of those techniques, like I'm saying, where you would where you'd need a lot more pre-work, I'll say. Adding a little smoke around where the 20s sit. What will sit, I don't have them in place yet. So again, I'm not doing much. I'm just adding a little bit here and there to kind of give the idea of use. I don't want it to be real heavy. I also don't want to look. I also don't want it to look like somebody just came back with a pencil and rubbed a pencil on it, which is why I come back with the brush to try to blend it a little bit. Uh, in retrospect, I probably should have done this and then put the landing gear on, but because now I can't actually get under those landing gear flaps, but that's okay. Do some of the same up here. I am not on camera. Oh, that didn't help. There we go. It's the other problem about switching sides. I'm used to being in one place and now I'm in another as far as where my visible working area is. So see that very quickly, especially on the darker green, showed up as gunpowder blowback from the 20s. And it doesn't take much just to kind of blend it in a little bit. Again, you don't want to do too much, otherwise you'll wipe it all off, or you'll actually start rubbing that shiny spot like I talked about earlier. So we're going to flip the plane back over, go with some streaking dirt. Not a whole lot here. Again, not trying to do much. But if this wheel had run through some mud on the runway or something, it might have kicked up some dirt here and there. Just something to give it a little bit more interest without overdoing it. I find that it works nicely with the oil dot filter that we've done on previous videos. Really just kind of tying everything together. Especially if you blend it. So getting a little bit more interest in the underside. Now you might wonder why. Who cares? Nobody's going to flip it over. I actually do sometimes, which is why I spend a little time on it. We might also have some water streaks. Now here I want to be really careful with this because this is a very light color. It's going on a very dark surface. So it would be very easy for this to be too much. So what I want to do is I want to come to some of these protrusions in the wing. Now, these are actually going to be landing lights ultimately, or navigation lights I should probably say ultimately, that I'll come back and paint. But you could imagine water beating around them and then trailing off of those points and causing some wear there. So that's what I'm going to try to very carefully emulate. And again, it's not much because we have a very dark color that we're putting a very light color on. And so, see, I'm not. That's probably all I want to do. I'm not going to do much. Just this little streak. I might do a little bit more now that I say that. It's a little bit more subtle in person, but it's very easy to suddenly have done too much, and it can be difficult to take this back after you put the flag coat on. So I like the way that looks. Just a little bit of a streak there. So I'm going to do that over here as well. Maybe a little heavier on this one. Don't want them all to look the same. Probably would have some from this control surface as well. This one's going to be a little difficult due to its position. Let me see if I can get a sharp point on this. Might have been a good time to have done this in advance, but I can get the idea of it at least. And again, I don't want much anyway, so I'll take that as a good win there. So we'll do the same thing on the other side. Again, we're not doing much, just it looks like a lot to begin with, and then we come back and tone it down a little bit. And you can do as much or as little of this as you want. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with painting an aircraft as if it just came out of the factory at some point. It did. It's a hobby, so do with it what you want. A little bit definitely goes a long way in my opinion. So that's why I don't do a whole lot of it. We probably need some on the tail, otherwise it's going to look a little funny. So maybe from these actuation points, there might be some streaking water. You can probably see I didn't get completely away from the silvering, unfortunately. So we might try to cover that up a little bit with some weathering. If you get way too much on there, you can wet your brush, and most of it will come off. You don't want to do it and do it and do it over and over again, because eventually you'll rub that bright spot like we talked about. So you don't want to do that. I think we'll also add some streaked dirt back here. Might have been kicked up by the wheels. Just a little bit of it. Okay, now I'm going to try something I've not really done much of before. I'm going to come back with the aluminum and try to do some of the wear and tear that would have occurred with the pilot getting in and out of the plane. Um, there may be a correct side for this. I probably should have looked before, but I'll probably do a little bit of weathering like this on both sides because I can imagine the pilot getting in on one side and maybe a maintenance crew getting up on the other side and causing this kind of wear. But another place that you would see chipping would be around the opening for the engine. Now it's really easy to overdo this, again, because you're working with a much brighter color than what's underneath. So in my mind, again, a little bit goes a long way. It also somewhat depends on what era or what time frame you're building your aircraft. In the beginning of the war, the Japanese were much better about maintaining their aircraft than they were later on. They just didn't have the manpower for it. But see, I'm not doing much. I'm just chipping a little bit, and it's already showing up quite a bit. So you can see if you did this too much, it would almost look cartoony or toy-like. Before I do any sort of major chipping around the fuselage, you might also pick some panels that might have come off fairly often. So we've got some panels here where you would have seen maintenance for the 20mm cannons. So you might have some instances where you have some chipping around the edges of those panels. So we'll go back and add a little bit of that. Again, I'm not going to add a whole lot. I'm going to come back and brush some of this off. But just the idea that this panel had been used. Is really all I'm looking for there. So a few chips around the edges of the panels is really all it kind of takes to give that indication. Now it would have been easier, again, to have painted silver first and then come back and literally chipped this off. But I didn't do that. So we will do what we can do just with some pencils. Now I don't want to mimic exactly what I did on the other side. Maybe this one's an older panel, so it's got a little bit more chipping done. Now they would have kind of walked up through the plane side here. So I'm going to make maybe some larger chips in this area. And I'm not weathering it to the extent that some people might. But heavier here perhaps than elsewhere. And see how I like it. done this before, so I'm not really sure the best way to do it, but I kind of like the way it's coming out. So you can see I'm just kind of starting to add some silvering markings here and there. Used a little bit to cover up some of my silvering. I'll probably do that even more. But just kind of giving it an indication of where the pilots might have caused some damage to the paint. So something like that. I may come back and do a little bit more later on, but it's a good starting point, I think. Kind of do the same thing on the other side. And I'm trying not to handle the aircraft too much. Don't want to remove any of the flat coat that I put on. So it'd be really easy to overdo this, I think. But you can kind of see now the idea. Just kind of making it look a little beat up, where someone might have climbed up towards the cockpit to get in or uh, hand the pilot something. Just a little bit of chippage. I'm also going to add some to this surface near the markings where the decal broke through, as a handy way to cover up the fact that decal broke through. Because I would imagine that these areas that are raised would be prime candidates for damage. So I think that's coming along pretty well. And like I said, I don't tend to do a whole lot of this anyway. So what I'm doing around the cockpit is already way more than I'm used to, so it feels weird to be coloring on my model almost. But I think I like the effect that it's getting. What do you think? Just a little bit. So anyway, I wanted to just do a shorter video. Um, I don't know if anyone considers a 37-minute video short, but just something a little quicker to give the idea of how to do this. I'll probably do a little bit more, and then like I said, off stream, I'm going to spray a gloss coat on the prop. And then I may do a really short final video showcasing uh, the completed model. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments, and otherwise we'll catch you next time. Thanks.